One of the main struggles of being a music fan is when people on the average sort of viewing of music, average listener of music, they always seem to categorize you in a box based around what you mostly listen to, what you've shown to listen to on the daily basis, or anything adjacent to that. And they always seem to assume that's the only form of music that you happen to listen to. In my case, I would show metal bands like, for example, Blasphemy, Testament, Morbid Angel, anything like that. And whenever I talk about this, people always categorize me as someone who only listens to metal. And frankly, that's not exactly fair because I'm also a big fan of many genres and many other styles of music. And not a lot of people happen to be as open-minded to the fact that so many music listeners are very diverse when it comes down to their discovery of music, what kind of music they like on a broader scale because it's easier to box people. And I figured I'd be able to just add a whole lot more to that conversation when it comes down to getting into music as someone who's a big-time, passionate music fan. And this video is going to be about that. This video is all about some of my favorite genres out there. Some of the genres that really just gravitate towards me, and something that I've always wanted to show to other people. Something that I can really just say, hey, this is what I'm into, this is what I like, and this is something that I would recommend to someone if they really want to explore outside of their knowledge when it comes down to music. So, let's fucking do it. How would I describe Vaporwave? Vaporwave is something that I've really have gotten into since I'd say when I was 16, 17, around that time, especially with artists like Blank Banshee, Saint Pepsi, Macintosh Plus, everything that just really captures the feeling of when you're a Gen Xer or an older millennial, trying to capture the nostalgic feeling of the 1980s and 90s. This stuff is just a mixture of like the feeling of, well, 80s pop, jazz, hypnagogic pop, everything that comes with it, the aesthetic of it. Remembering a time where you felt like everything was going great, everything was going well. While at the same time, Vaporwave is also a critique of the consumerist culture, pop culture, and how many people happen to use nostalgia in order to remember, well, that said pop culture when they feel like it's somehow a better time. When they feel like it's somehow just a better time to be alive, when you felt like everything was going great, everything was going more stable, and, well, the aesthetic of, well, Vaporwave happens to come in many forms. Like, for example, looking at a 1980s guide video on driving, or looking at a VHS style video, or looking at old school Simpsons. It's like looking in the past, but looking at the past through the lens of someone who actually experienced that time. And when someone like for example, Chuck Pearson with Eco Jams really captures the deep, nostalgic feeling. When Chuck Pearson just captures the feeling of like, hey, I want to go back to that time. I want to be able to just experience that life. A life full of stability, everything of that fucking caliber. And when I talk to people about this, they always seem to say like, oh, why does it matter? It's just nothing more than slowed down, remixed aesthetics, mixed in with like 1980s sort of like wavy aesthetics and anything that comes with it. And my response is, well, it gives you a sense of like melancholy, nostalgia. And personally, I don't like to be influenced by the feeling of nostalgia. But at the same time, it is such a pretty powerful feeling. And I was born in 1998, like the cusp of the new millennium. I'm a fucking like elder zoomer. And the fact that I feel nostalgic for the 1980s and the early 90s with a subgenre like Vaporwave that just puts a whole lot more into like the mixture of the critique of pop culture, consumerist nostalgia, and also the feeling of quote-unquote economic stability and society stability. It really just, it makes you think. I would consider Memphis rap to be the black metal of hip-hop. Why? Mostly of two things. Number one, the earliest examples of Memphis rap have this raw, very just impactful sort of sound that you hear. Like, for example, in early, let's see here, Gangsta Pat records, also some early 3 6 Mafia records, you feel like there's this dark atmosphere. Not only that, but also Memphis rappers do explore many occult themes. And when I discover that Yo Gotti actually did some Memphis rap stuff like Little Yo, and how this style just influenced many other styles like the famous style of trap, drill, funk, anything that came out of that scene has inspired so many other people. And when I look at this genre and I want to listen to it, I feel like I'm listening to something so untapped, so just completely just unknown on the surface. But at the same time, it has influenced so many others. Another rapper that I've always recommended to people is Tommy Wright III. Most because of his consistent flow, his usage of like chiptune video game sound effects that you would hear on like an old Nintendo system, or maybe a Sega system or something. And Tommy Wright III just really captures that sort of like early trap influence, that early proto-trap sort of thing that you would just hear. And when someone says, oh, I wish I knew the origins of trap music and southern hip-hop, I would always look to Memphis hip-hop. And, of course, I would always recommend, like I just said, Tommy Wright III. If you want hip-hop that really captures rawness in the beginning and just allows you to just really feel that sort of feel, I would recommend definitely Memphis rap. Experimental hip-hop. How do I describe this style? Well, it's in the name. Hip-hop, that's experimental. But what kind of examples could I give that really cement the fact that experimental hip-hop definitely knows, well, how to be experimental? For example, is definitely Death Grips. Now, Death Grips was actually introduced to me by Anthony Fantano. I know, I'm one of those people that was influenced by Anthony Fantano. Yeah. And, yeah, I will say, as the years go by, discovering Death Grips and, of course, discovering records like Ex-Military and any other record like that, I always seem to always stand the fact that Death Grips is something that you have to really build a palate for. For example, when I listen to Get Gots or when I listen to Guillotine, I know that was my first song. Basic introduction, I know, but that's how many of us got into the fucking Death Grips. Come on, we cannot lie to ourselves. You watch Guillotine, I watch Guillotine, that's how we got into them. It's a fact. Anyway, yeah, Death Grips mixes elements of noise, punk, hardcore, industrial with their hip-hop sound, and MC Rai, he doesn't have like a usual flow that you expect from a rapper. But at the same time, he is an artist and a poet in an experimental hip-hop group. And when Death Grips just does so many things on stage and does so many things that really cement the fact that they know how to experiment, it really gives you a sense of like, hey, they definitely know how to experiment. Other groups I would include are something like Danny Brown, definitely is like very nasally, sort of like influence from indie and like industrial that's included into a sound. Clipping, definitely more of the stronger industrial sound, and also the noise elements that definitely have more of a pronunciation within the records, especially Daveed Diggs. My god, the dude from Hamilton also is part of Clipping. He is such an amazing rapper. And also, one more example I would actually like to put in is Little B the Bass God. God, when I would listen to his stuff, like for example, Wonton Soup, and of course, like, Bitch I Own Swag. God, I would listen to his stuff, and it's like, he is the most unserious rapper, and yet he makes some of the most genuine hip-hop that I would ever listen to. And honestly, it's just fun rap. It's like rap that I could just like play in the background and not take so seriously. It's really great stuff like that. Shoegaze is not something that I can describe just immediately. Shoegaze is, well, pretty much dependent on atmosphere. Not saying there aren't like great guitar lines or there aren't great riffs within shoegaze, but with a very like drony atmosphere based subgenre of rock like shoegaze, you just can't really define it. You can't really just put it into a box per se. You can't just give it to someone and be like, hey, listen to this. No, but at the same time, there's something dreamy about it. There's something so relaxing about shoegaze, and knowing the fact that they can just make this stuff, make some of the most beautiful atmosphere that you can ever listen to just by playing a few notes and a few chords that can just create an atmosphere. And also, well, if they put the name in shoegaze, just gazing at their shoes or they're playing some riffs, it's just, it really puts so much emphasis on that. For examples, the examples I would always bring up are like My Bloody Valentine, Slow Dive, Have a Nice Life, and I would also bring up some like Metal Gaze and Black Gaze sort of bands like Alcest or Godless or Chizu. And with those kind of bands, they just really stamp around the fact that, well, this stuff is very atmosphere based. You have to really sit down, relax, and just allow yourself to just disassociate and let the music just take you to something remarkable. It really does put the name in shoegaze. Soft rock, I feel like, doesn't have enough recognition or appreciation that it does deserve. Some people consider soft rock to be a contradiction. Some people say that soft rock is an oxymoron. But at the same time, soft rock actually does have a whole lot of beauty and merit in it. Now, when I got into soft rock, it was during the time when I was a little kid. My mom would not just play like the usual hair metal, thrash metal, and usually the classic heavy metal and hard rock bands that she would usually play and also just played in front of me. She would also play certain bands and artists that have more of a softer, more emotional tug and feel to it. Stuff like Jim Croce or Walter Egan. Now, Walter Egan has a very special place in my heart. Walter Egan is someone who really, really just touched me, especially with a song like Magnet and Steel. If you don't know what Magnet and Steel happens to be, God, that song is just so fucking beautiful. It's beautiful, it's nostalgic, it really just hammers down the feeling of just falling in love. It's like it teaches you the feeling of falling in love. And when you meet someone who you can fully be yourself with, you are not shy around them, and you can actually just be all the way open with them. And when I listen to that song, God, it's not just nostalgic because I'm trying to remember my mom, rest in peace, but it's also me just trying to like understand the feeling of falling in love with someone who you can feel like you'd be open with. And well, not just Walter Egan and Jim Croce, but also there's another artist that really just touches me, really just gives you that sort of like soft rock feel, makes you appreciate them. And that artist is Paul Davis. Now, if you don't know who Paul Davis is, please give him a listen. Paul Davis really captures another great way in order to introduce like soft rock. With his song I Go Crazy, my God. Oh, talking about like the feeling of just being with your ex-lover who you're still on good terms with, but also, you also feel like you can't just let them go internally. Like you let them go, live their life, but at the same time, the phrase, they say old lovers can be good friends, but I never thought I would see you again. I go crazy when I look into your eyes. God, those lyrics really hit you. It's like that feeling of just seeing your old lover. God, it really hits you. It really does hit you. Neo-folk or apocalyptic folk. That's something that I never thought I would actually just get into. It's a genre that's pretty monotone in its atmosphere, while at the same time, it also has this feeling of just pure dread ahead. Like you're expecting the world just to fall apart and everyone is out on their own and you have to rebuild society from the ground up, allow society to become a phoenix again, from the ashes to the new. And apocalyptic folk is pretty much acoustic based and talks about the demise and fall of society and civilization. And certain examples I would always bring up. despite them being pretty controversial, and I'll fully admit, a lot of them do and have said some things that I personally would just be critical of, but at the same time, I just cannot deny their influence in the neo-folk genre. That is, people like Death in June. Well, a project like Death in June, and of course, Nurse with Wound, and, well, of course, Daughters. Many of their sort of like records and many of their sort of sound just really gives you this very deep, just very like self-reflective feeling. And also just the feeling of dread ahead, like I said before. And when you see it, when you know the feeling of just the apocalypse coming, the fall of civilization, it's like you want to embrace the acceleration of the fall. And neo-folk definitely just captures that feeling. And it's something that I've always wanted to incorporate into my own sound whenever I play acoustic music. And neo-folk is definitely something that you have to really build a palette for. Because neo-folk definitely has its own sort of sound. And I think one other artist, if you really get into neo-folk, one artist that I would always recommend is the Revolutionary Army of the Infant Jesus. When I'm listening to that record, I'm just like, wow, this stuff is just so amazing. God. Something that really disappoints me about discussing music is when anybody says, I'll listen to anything except for country. And that's not fair. There's actually a whole slew of country artists that do bring a whole lot of grit, sincerity, and so much passion within the genre. Like you got your classics like Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash. And of course, they fall under the category of outlaw country. Country that has more grits, sincerity, honesty, and perfection. You can feel a whole lot more humanity from them. You can also talk about certain modern artists like Tyler Childers or artists like that. And when you talk about modern day country, they always seem to look to certain artists like Luke Combs or Brad Paisley or something. And that sort of thing just really bothers me because those guys are just too clean, too polished, a little too constrained for me. And I would always recommend them to listen to stuff like Tyler Childers or, I don't know, the old school artists like Johnny Cash or Waylon Jennings. And when they always just bring in this sort of honesty with them, this sincere guitar sound, not this whole like bro country or this whole like rap country sort of bullshit that they try to put in. It's just, it feels so just so insincere. Just really just hammers down just why. I just don't happen to like the whole Brad Paisley sort of bullshit. Industrial music. How do I describe my love for this? Industrial music really captures the sort of like feeling of working in a factory, either in like the pre-industrial sort of sense, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, or something that is conceiving of the future. And when people talk about industrial music, people happen to go towards Nine Inch Nails because that's the most mainstream and accessible sort of band out there, and honestly, I don't blame them. Nine Inch Nails came around the time of grunge, and Nine Inch Nails made a whole lot of appeal towards the wider audience, but there's also other artists that really just hammer it down. Now, for example, Godflesh, or Front 242, or Frontline Assembly. These sort of artists can just really hammer down why industrial music just gets so much of an amazing name when it comes down to discussing music. Industrial music just having this sort of like factory rhythm that you can just feel and you can just hear just impact your ears. It's not something that I can just really describe in simple words. It's something that I've really wanted to hammer down for people, for someone to really understand that. When industrial music comes into the realms of metal, hip-hop, pop, goth, dance music, anything that comes into it, my God, just really, really shows the versatility of industrial. And that's not something that I can just, like, describe and box in. You have to really, really go down the rabbit hole of industrial music. When I was thinking about making this video, I really wanted to just open the door and open people's eyes to music fans just being passionate about all kinds of styles that otherwise many people would just assume it's like one particular style or just one group. And frankly, this sort of conversation is needed among the music community. And when I discuss this, when I discuss the variety of music styles, whether it be like genres, subgenres, microgenres, styles, subcultures, it's like people just box themselves into one particular style. When people categorize you on what type of music that you listen to, in my case, people always categorize me as a rocker or a metalhead because, hey, piercings, long hair, and everything of that sort. And as much as I am a huge fan of rock, punk, and metal, I'm also a huge fan of many other genres like that because I don't really consider myself a metalhead per se. I consider myself a big-time music head, a passionate music fan that can just find anything that just really tickles my fancy, that can really just make me feel so passionate, can really move me, that can really just make me enjoy any sort of style whatsoever. Why? I feel like if you limit yourself to only one style of music or one group of music, you'd just be missing out on so much amazing stuff that can really just open your horizons, make you discover yourself, make you realize that there's so much more to music than what people happen to realize. And that's not something that I've always wanted to just, well, keep to myself. And that's not something that I just want to keep to myself. So, hope you liked the video. Hopefully I provided something to the music community. And also, you know what to do. You don't need for me to say oh, like, subscribe, comment, blah, blah, blah. You know what to fucking do. I'm not going to hold your hand. So, yeah. Hope you all enjoyed. Peace.